February 1959. The Ural Mountains, Russia. 9 experienced hikers are somewhere up in those mountains. They left 3 weeks ago. They were supposed to check in by now. Nobody has heard from them. A search party goes out to find them. What they find when they finally reach the campsite stops them cold. The tent is still there, half buried in snow but standing. All the hikers' gear is inside. Their food, their shoes, their warm clothes. Everything they would need to survive a night in the mountains at minus 40 degrees. But the hikers aren't inside, and the tent has been cut open from the inside, not unzipped, not pulled apart, cut. Someone took a knife and sliced through the fabric from inside the tent, and then went out into the dark. The search party follows tracks in the snow. 9 sets of footprints leading away from the tent, going down the mountain toward the tree line below. Some of the tracks are barefoot, in minus 40-degree weather, on a Russian mountain, in the middle of the night. Over the next few weeks, all 9 hikers are found dead, some near a tree, some on the slope, some buried under the snow in a ravine. Their injuries are some of the strangest things investigators have ever seen. Nobody has ever fully explained what happened that night. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. And honestly, even with everything science has figured out since 1959, there are still parts of this that don't sit right with me. Let me tell you who these 9 people were because they matter. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Soviet Russia. He was experienced. All of them were. These weren't beginners who got in over their heads. They were trained hikers who had done difficult mountain expeditions before. The group had 10 people at the start. One turned back after several days for medical reasons. His name was Yuri Yudin. He had a bad knee and had to head home. He hugged his friends goodbye and watched them walk away into the mountains. He was the only one who came home. The 9 who continued were young, mostly in their early 20s, students, mostly. Some had done harder trips than this one. The route they had planned was difficult but not impossible. They were prepared. They had proper gear. They had food for the whole trip. On February 1st, the team began making their way through the pass toward Mount Otorten. As they pushed forward, they were hit by a snowstorm. Due to low visibility, they lost their direction and accidentally ended up on the slope of a nearby mountain. The local Mansi people had a name for that mountain. In their language, it meant Dead Mountain. Kolatsiakal. They made camp on the slope. They set up their tent. They started getting ready for the night. And then something happened. The search party found the bodies of the first 5 hikers spread out over the snowy pass. Some were barely dressed, in minus 40-degree weather, with bizarre injuries. The first 2 bodies were found nearly a mile away from the tent, under a cedar tree next to the remains of a small campfire. They had tried to make a fire. They were barely dressed. Their hands showed signs of severe frostbite. It looked like they had been out there in the open, far from the tent, for some time before they died. 3 more bodies were found closer to the tent. Igor Dyatlov himself, and 2 others. Their positions suggested they had been trying to walk back up the slope, back toward the tent, when they died. These 5 all died from hypothermia, frozen to death in the mountain cold. But then the snow melted in the spring and 4 more bodies were found in a ravine, buried under several feet of snow. And these 4 were different. Lyudmila Dubanina had crushed ribs and internal bleeding, and her eyes, tongue, and part of her lips were missing. Semyon Zolotaryov also had fractured ribs and massive internal trauma. Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles had suffered a fatal skull fracture. The force needed to crush ribs like that. Investigators said it was comparable to a car crash, but there were no external wounds, no bruising on the skin. Whatever caused those injuries had done it from the inside, in a way nobody could easily explain. And Dubanina's missing tongue and eyes, that detail spread around the world. It became the centerpiece of every conspiracy theory about this case for decades. On top of all of this, investigators found things that made no sense. Some of the hikers' clothing tested positive for radiation. Low levels, but detectable. Why would hikers in the middle of the Ural Mountains have radioactive clothing? The Soviet government's official explanation for the deaths was that the hikers had died from, and I'm quoting directly, a compelling natural force. That's it, compelling natural force. No further detail. The case was closed May 15, about 3 months after the deaths. This was Soviet Russia in 1959. The government didn't explain things. They closed files and moved on. Parts of the case files went missing. And that silence left a vacuum that theories rushed to fill. People said it was a government weapons test gone wrong. That the hikers had seen something they weren't supposed to see. That the KGB was involved. Some people said it was aliens. Others said it was a Yeti, a massive creature that attacked the camp. And because the files were sealed, And because the Soviet Union wasn't open to outside investigation, nobody could say for certain any of these theories were wrong. One of the things that makes this case different from a lot of mysteries is that the hikers left records, diaries, cameras, notes written in their own handwriting. The group kept multiple diaries during the trip, some individual, some shared. The last entries were written on February 1st. They described a normal day of hiking, getting hit by the storm, deciding to camp on the slope. Nothing alarming. No sense that anyone was afraid, no feeling that anything was wrong. Igor Dyatlov himself wrote the last entry. It was practical, confident, the kind of entry an experienced person writes at the end of a normal day. He had no idea it would be the last thing he ever wrote. They also had cameras, several cameras. When the search party found the tent and the bodies, they found the cameras too. The film inside was still usable. The photos were developed. Most of them showed normal hiking trip photos. The group marching through snow, setting up camp, smiling at the camera. The kinds of photos you take on a trip with friends when you don't know anything bad is going to happen. Because nothing bad is supposed to happen. The last photos taken that night showed the group setting up the tent on the slope. Normal, routine, people doing what hikers do, and then the cameras stopped. Whatever happened after those last photos were taken. In the darkness, after they went to sleep, when nobody was holding a camera anymore. The cameras recorded the before. There is no record of the after. And honestly, that detail, those last normal photos of 9 people who had no idea, is the part of this case that stays with me more than anything else. Here's where things get interesting. And I want to be honest with you, because this part of the story is less mysterious than the theories. But it's actually more fascinating in its own way. In 2021, Zurich professor Alexander Puzrin and scientist Johann Gaum published a study using computer models to explain what happened. They argued that a rare slab avalanche, triggered by the hikers cutting into the slope to pitch their tent, made worse by wind-driven snow building up overnight, could explain both the injuries and the chaotic scene. A slab avalanche is different from a regular avalanche. It's not a wall of snow rushing down a mountain. It's a compressed layer of snow that suddenly releases and slides. And it can happen on slopes that don't look dangerous at all. The hikers had cut into the slope to pitch their tent flat. That cut may have triggered the release hours later while they were sleeping. That would explain why they cut the tent from inside. If you wake up with a slab of snow pressing down on you in the dark, in the middle of the night, you don't look for the zipper. You grab a knife and you cut your way out as fast as you can. It explains why they ran downhill instead of back towards safety. When you are panicked and half asleep in the dark, you run away from the danger. It explains the injuries. A compressed snow slab hitting sleeping bodies would cause internal trauma without external bruising. Exactly what the 4 bodies in the ravine showed. In 2020, the Russian government officially concluded, slab avalanche. That was the official cause of death. As for the radiation, 2 members of the group had connections to a 1957 Soviet nuclear disaster. One had lived in the contaminated zone. One had helped with the cleanup. The trace radiation came with those 2 hikers and transferred to the others through shared clothing. And the missing tongue and eyes. Those bodies were in a ravine, under snow, for months before they were found. Animals get into those spaces. Decomposition does strange things. Scientists say both can be explained by natural processes after death. Here's the thing though. I've read all of this. I've gone through the science. I understand the avalanche theory. It's supported by real research from real scientists. And I still have questions. The scientists themselves were careful to say their findings were a plausible explanation, not a proven fact. There is no documented avalanche debris, no snowpack photographs, no witness who saw a snowslide that night. Nobody saw it. No physical evidence of the avalanche itself was found, only evidence consistent with what an avalanche might cause. And there's the question of why experienced hikers camped on an exposed slope in the first place. These were people who knew what they were doing. They had done harder trips than this. Would they really have camped somewhere that risky? The diaries suggest they were tired and running behind schedule. Maybe they made a bad call. That happens to experienced people too. I think the honest answer is this. The avalanche theory is probably right. The science supports it. The Russian government has officially accepted it. But probably right and definitely right are different things. And in a case where 9 people died under these circumstances, on a mountain in Soviet Russia in 1959, with files that were sealed for decades, probably right is the best anyone is going to get. 9 people went into those mountains and never came home. Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, Yuri Doroshenko, Rustam Slobodin, Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Semyon Zolotaryov. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignoles, Yuri Krivonishenko. The mountain pass where they died is named after Igor Dyatlov now, the Dyatlov Pass. People still go there sometimes. Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back with the bad knee, lived until 2013. He spent decades thinking about his friends. In 2013, the year he died, he went back to the pass one last time. He left flowers there. I don't know exactly what happened on the night of February 1st, 1959. Nobody does. The best explanation we have is a slab of snow that shifted in the dark and sent 9 people running into the cold without their shoes. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe the mystery was never as deep as people wanted it to be. But 9 people died on that mountain. And that matters, whatever caused it. Thank you for watching. The Dyatlov Pass case is one of those stories that gets under your skin. Not because of the conspiracy theories, but because of how ordinary it started. 9 friends on a hiking trip. And then nothing. See you in the next one.